Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence brought before...
Whoa. I believe this is my show and I get to do the opening. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss the 4th through 9th episodes of She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Bethany Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair is my lovely husband, Laramy Wells. How are you doing today, Laramy?
I am wonderful, Bethany. How are you?
I'm great. I hope you're ready for the rest of this episode. I think I'm going to let you drive the rest of the way.
Okay. It's very fitting, though, because we are talking about She-Hulk, where She-Hulk, especially when it comes to the final episode of this season, make sure that everyone knows that it is her show, and she can do things the way she wants to. I know we're a little late to the game. We're about a month late. The show ended in October. I think it was October 13th was the final, but this is Bethany's birthday episode.
Yay!
And I asked her what she wanted to do, and she wanted to talk about She-Hulk. So
I did.
Here we are to talk about the rest of She-Hulk. Now, I don't want to get too much into what were your thoughts on She-Hulk, but what were your feelings as it kind of played out? We've already talked about the first 3 episodes. You can go back and give those a listen. Now we've watched the rest of it. So what were your thoughts? Like, did anything change from when we first saw those first episodes to the season finale?
I wouldn't say anything changed. Like, I still felt the same way I feel about Jennifer Walters. She's just a gem. And I guess, notoriously in the first 3 episodes podcast that we recorded, I did not want the whole dating plot to continue. And that basically became the main plot for her throughout the rest of the season. I mean, sort of.
Ish, yeah.
Kind of the driving factor. And I will say that my feelings towards that storyline did change. I warmed up to it because I thought they handled it really well. But other than that, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah, we're going to jump straight into this because I want to talk about characters. And as the show went along, there are so many characters. And I mean, they reached down into the pit of Marvel Comics to find some of these characters. I did want to go back. We talked about Jennifer's parents in the first 3, and I mentioned I don't know a lot about the original She-Hulk run. I read a few of the ones in the 90s, but I ended up finding out that Morris Walters, her dad, played by Mark Lynn-Baker from Perfect Strangers, actually is in the comics and actually appears in the 2nd issue of all time.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, back in the when it was called The Savage She-Hulk. He appears in issue 2, and he's actually a LA sheriff.
Oh. So even though he wasn't a stranger to this storyline, to you, he was a perfect stranger.
Yes. Yes. And I would actually be interested because they kind of, in my opinion, her dad in this show is kind of portrayed as he is retired.
Yeah.
And it'd be kind of interesting.
What is he retired from?
It would be interesting to find out that he actually was
I would love to hear more about their family life, which I think if they were to continue the show could be a possibility. But yeah, I enjoyed the dynamics between her and her dad, and then as they started to incorporate her mom more, like, clearly she came from a really happy family, which is so rare in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, which we talked about in the first in the previous episode.
It was nice to see not an orphan being given powers.
Yeah. Another person that we kind of briefly mentioned but didn't get into was Dennis Bukowski, who you were not a fan of.
Not a fan. Still not.
And I ended up finding out he was also in the 2nd issue of Savage She-Hulk. But just like in the show, he's arrogant, he's chauvinist, He is always going after and prodding Jennifer as well as She-Hulk, and so they took that character right off the page.
Good to know.
Uh,
I still don't like him.
Yeah. Then we didn't talk about Titania because she had just kind of briefly been introduced in the first 3 episodes, but she became a little bit more of a player as the show went along.
Kind of. She had like a solid episode where she was a real contender.
Yeah, when she purchased the name She-Hulk.
Yeah.
Played by Jamila Jamil. The character, again, from the comics, Secret Wars #3. She was just a woman named Mary McFerrin, who, coincidentally enough, that name was actually named after a real-life Marvel employee.
Oh, so she just happened to have like the perfect like naming convention. It's like Stan Lee bumped into her one day and he's like, "I'm so sorry, what is your name?" And she said, and he's like, "Ha ha."
Wasn't Stan Lee though that created the character, but
he said, "You've got to name
someone."
Yeah,
he did ask for her permission to use her name as the character. But the thing about the character in the comics is that because she really is a She-Hulk villain.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of She-Hulk villains. Most of the villains She-Hulk goes after are usually villains from other comics. And Titania really becomes, in the comics, a She-Hulk villain. Even though she's introduced in Secret War #3. Well, Titania is. Mary McFerrin actually appeared in She-Hulk. Or I think it was She-Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
But then Dr. Doom, when they're on Battle World, Dr. Doom gives her her powers and she becomes Titania. Her powers actually rival She-Hulk. Okay. So they actually like
she is as strong.
She is just, she's as strong as She-Hulk. Which their battles, the couple of fights they had, probably the best one was at the wedding.
Yeah.
But the couple of battles they had were just kind of Yeah. But any thoughts on the Titania character?
I mean, I loved Jamila Jamil just because she's a funny actress, but I don't think that they did them very much justice. I don't know. The storyline that Titania had was interesting, but it didn't really go anywhere. It's kind of how I felt about a lot of the episodes.
A lot of storylines didn't go anywhere.
Each episode could honestly be a standalone episode. There was very little overall story arc.
Yeah, and that was following the court drama.
Yeah, that's
the court
true.
drama that the kind of the Ally McBeal thing they were going. There were little intertwining stories, but each episode kind of held its own little story.
Yeah.
Speaking of. In one of those, we were introduced to our, I guess you'd now say, second mutant actually in the MCU, with Miss Marvel being confirmed as a mutant. And that was Mr. Immortal.
That was a funny episode.
Yeah. Mr. Immortal, who debuted in July of 1989 in the West Coast Avengers #46. Now, he's a member of a team called the Great Lakes Avengers.
Okay.
Which is meant to be a comedic team.
Okay.
Like, he's meant to be silly. His character's meant to be crazy.
You've heard of the A team. You've heard of the B team. This is the F team.
Yeah. There's a lot of D-list in this show, which we're going to get into. That's one of the things I want to do. It's so much fun. But yeah, you had his character where you end up finding out because he can't die, he has had to fake his death to get out of
bad marriages. Yeah. Or not even bad marriages.
No, just because when he gets bored with them, he
kills himself.
And then they find out, which shout out to a friend of mine, Heidi Rue, who played one of the ex-wives. That was there, and that was fun. As soon as I saw her, I was like, hey, I know her. So radio personality here in Atlanta. So what did you think of the Mr. Immortal character?
I mean, it was fun. It was cute the way he kept trying to kill himself. That was kind of funny. But what I really loved about that storyline was Mallory and Nikki and their dynamics together. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really would have loved to have seen Mallory get more incorporated into the main storyline. Just because when she was involved, it was so fascinating. She's Renee Ellis Gouldsberry has such wonderful timing. She's an incredible actor. And then Nikki playing off of her because she was kind of this like goofy, but also knows her stuff.
And I think it's in that episode that there's a rumor going around that Nikki is actually aware of the television show.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who believe she glances at the camera really quick at one point, which there is talk that she's loosely based off of a character from the I can't think of the character's name, but Jennifer does have a person who works in the law office with her.
Yeah.
That is aware that she's in a comic book.
Can I tell you the TikTok theory I heard?
Sure.
That she's Agatha.
Oh, yeah. You were telling me about that.
Yeah. That would be kind of cool, too.
I don't know, but then you'd lose her
I know. That's the bummer.
out of the She-Hulk show.
But if she was, then she would be... That would bring Jennifer into, like, the Wanda storyline.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've already kind of done that with Wong. Since Wanda was in Doctor Strange.
But
so moving on, we think, what was it? Episode 4, I think this very next episode. They introduced the Wrecking Crew. I mean, of all supervillain teams, they brought in the Wrecking Crew.
But, like, they did very little with them.
They did. They did a little bit more with Crowbar because they had him pop up later. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about a superhero team in which it's 4 guys that all have powers based off of some sort of construction type tool. And it all starts because the one guy finds a enchanted crowbar. And then the other 3 get their powers because they were holding his crowbar when it got struck by lightning. That's how it works in the comic.
That's how I got my powers, Laramy.
That's how it works in the comic.
Holding an enchanted crowbar and got struck by lightning.
Whereas in the show, they at least more imply that the other 3 guys had... Yeah, they had actual objects as well.
Yeah.
And it wasn't part of it because one of... I always forget which one's which. The only one that matters is crowbar. But one of them, his hands just like got really big. Yeah. And that's his power.
When I eat a lot of salt, my hands also get really big.
But yeah, the Wrecking Crew. Just to give the first appearance, it was the Defenders, number 17 from November of 1974. So there you go, the Defenders. Daredevil and all that group. Then we got to see a little bit more of Abomination, Emil Blonsky, and his little retreat. Which was a supervillain support group in some of the most bottom of the barrel Marvel villains they could find.
I mean, that was funny. I'm not gonna lie. And there were some really good actors like hidden within that. But are we gonna wait to talk about the finale?
Yeah, we're gonna wait to talk about the finale.
So then we'll just talk about these characters. And I will say Man-Bull was hysterical to me.
Yeah, so you had Man-Bull, who was a Daredevil villain in the comics, debuted in Daredevil number 78 in July of 1971. Now, in the show, he's a guy in a suit. But in the comic book, he is genetically altered into a Minotaur. So he actually is half man, half bull.
Yeah.
And then talk about another guy in a suit.
Yeah.
You had Porcupine.
And he was the stinky one, right?
Yes. Who is a random, like one of the very first Ant-Man villains. Because, Ant-Man had to have villains that were also animal related. From Tales to Astonish number 63 in October of 1963. So way, way out there. When Marvel was just getting going in the early 60s. You had El Aguila, the Eagle. Aguila, how you pronounce it, but it's the Eagle. He is an Iron Fist villain from Power Man and Iron Fist number 58 in August of 1979. And it was interesting seeing that character because we had just seen the Swordsman in Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And they're relatively the exact same character.
Yeah.
Then you had Sakaran, who is a Blade villain and actually a vampire. Because they implied he may not be a vampire, but in the comics he actually is a vampire. And he came from Blade #1, Blade Vampire Hunter, I think is the full name,
Yeah.
in December of 1999, so after the success of the movie. But yeah, you got that group with Abomination, and like I
Yeah.
said earlier, Crowbar from the Wrecking Crew is part of this group too. But yeah, what'd you think of them and them kind of being Jennifer's
like hype group?
Yeah, her little cheerleaders into getting going on getting back at the guy that stole her stuff and
what's his
and
face?
Everything. Yeah,
That was awful. I mean, that whole storyline was actually genuinely heartbreaking, especially as it kind of played out towards the end of the show. You know, it was fun. It was cute. I enjoyed watching those episodes. I liked kind of how it doesn't take away from the female perspective, because you've always got Nikki, who's also kind of feeding her hype and giving her advice. But it was kind of nice to get like a group of people who are going through therapy, who are trying to help work her through something that, honestly, like, I watched it and it was physically painful watching her kind of struggle with, she had a great date, they did some stuff, and then never heard from him again.
Yep.
He literally ghosted her after she's already pretty vulnerable from the episodes where she was trying to date somebody and couldn't get anyone interested in just her.
Yeah. Oh, and then as we mentioned earlier with Titania having to get her name back, and yeah, a lot of things were starting to fall apart for her as the show was going along. And so again, you had this little support group. I mean, when she even gets there, as soon as she arrives, her car gets totaled.
I know.
And so
Man Bull runs into it, doesn't he?
Yeah, it was one of they were goofing around and one of them ran into it. All right, let's also talk about Frogman.
Do we have to?
We do, because he was in this, and they decided to, again, take a bunch of random comic book characters. So Frogman, who's from Marvel Team Up number 121 in June of 1982. Now, Frogman is a superhero in the comics, but he's the son of a super villain named Leapfrog. And he decides to use his father's same suit and all, but he decides to be a hero, but he's not very good at it.
Much like he is in this.
Yeah, I love his secret hideout, the lily pad, and it's just got a giant lit up sign on it that says lily pad. And that's his secret lair.
Lily was so excited to see her name.
Yeah.
On television. He was so obnoxious.
Yeah, they do play him a little bit more.
I think one of the things that I found the most interesting about his character was it was towards the end, Jennifer had finally started working through a lot of her personal stuff. She was starting to get comfortable with who she was as a person. And then she's getting her clothes to where they fit her. And I'm glad we haven't talked about this yet, but in that, like, we discussed it in our episode where we talked about the first 3 episodes of She-Hulk. And then in the very next episode, they actually addressed her clothing not fitting correctly.
Yeah. And then she finds the fashion designer,
right,
Luke Jacobson,
who was chef's kiss. Adored. Want to see him. I want to see his own spin-off television show.
Yeah.
And it's like a say yes to the suit.
Well, he again, he's actually from the comics. He was in a comic called Dakota North, which lasted 5 issues.
Okay.
Yeah, again, they're pulling characters out of nowhere.
Think about it. It's like say yes to the dress, but you've got a soon-to-be superhero coming into his office, and he's just like, okay, and he's like showing them different outfits, and it ends with them like ringing the bell saying like, I'm saying yes to the suit.
Okay.
It could be like one-shot episodes. Yeah. Disney Plus, hit me up. I'll take $2 billion for this idea.
Just have him be the Edna
yes.
of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But yeah, so yeah, Frogman comes in and he has one of his suit is supposed to have been made by Luke Jacobson. Well, not supposed to. It is made by Luke Jacobson. And then it malfunctions, so he sues him. But Jennifer is representing Frogman.
Right.
So Luke actually gets upset with Jennifer and refuses to make her dress and all that. But it all works out because, I mean,
It does.
It is a show them, which that's
But kind of going back to the idea of the Frogman, it's then she has to battle with this idea of like she wants to help people and not, rich, all powerful people.
Mm.
But she's stuck in this place of like, I have to help this complete jerk who is in the wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a neat dynamic that he sets up, but he's also an a-hole.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the way it was kind of all set up for.
Yeah. Can we talk about the best character in the whole show?
I'm assuming you mean Madison.
Madison with a 2 N's and a Y, but not where you think it is.
Yeah. Who everybody now wants the Wong and Madison series. That's what everybody's
I don't want
now.
that. I want like, how you talk about the guy from Ant-Man? He needs to do like an Olaf where he summarizes every movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. But you want...
I want that. I want like every end credit scene to be Wong and Madison sitting on the couch going like, what?
All right, but we do have one other character I want to talk about before we wrap this up talking about the characters. And that's the character you were talking about, Frogman being the jerk that she has to represent and all that. But there was also Todd, who was the horrible guy that she had to represent, and then ultimately ends up being the villain of the show in a way.
Kind of. I really think that the villain of the show is toxic masculinity.
Yeah, but that's what Todd was. He was the physical embodiment of that. Yeah, because he was always hitting on him, talking about how, how great he was as a guy. And
right.
Yeah. But so, yeah, you have any other thoughts about that character?
He can suck it.
Okay.
Okay. To be more interesting on a podcast, he was so cringy. I could not stand watching him, but it was neat because of all the things that Jennifer was going throughout the entire series. He was a good representation, like a physical embodiment of all the struggles she was going through, because she tried to date him. She was struggling with her dating life. He's got a lot.
She didn't try to date him.
Well, they went on a date, is what I meant. She went on a date with him. She was struggling with her dating life. He doesn't like her because she's a woman. That's like her whole thing. He has a bunch of money. She struggles, she's working this job because she has to have money. Like basically everything she struggled with, he embodied. So that was an interesting, he was just not fun to look at. Yeah.
And then they have it, like I said, he kind of becomes the villain. You end up finding out he's the one that was behind trying to get her blood. And then he injects himself with it.
Right.
And he becomes Hulk King, even though that's not a character from the comics. It was completely made up for them to go off the rails like they do in the final episode, which we'll get into in just a moment. But first, I have to ask you the question that I always ask. So, who do you want to see again, and who do you wish was canceled?
Oh,
we can actually,
I like that. Okay, so who do I want to see again? Obviously,
I guess Madison. Yeah.
Well, not just Madison. I want to see. Can I have more than one?
Sure, but they have to be of these random characters that I've been talking about.
So we can't say Daredevil.
No, because you already know you're going to see Daredevil, and Daredevil's a major character. I want to know based off of all of these random characters.
Genuinely, I want to see more of Luke Jacobson.
Okay,
I would love to see him intertwined, even if it's just like a background thing, where it's almost like he's the new Coulson, where he's
like I said, if they made him like an Edna.
Yeah,
from
he's
Incredibles
just
type.
In the loop. He's around to because
like
we've
they
got
did
a
with
bunch
Night
of
Nurse,
new,
like they did with Rosario Dawson on the Netflix series.
Right, we've got a bunch of new superheroes, and not all of them are going to just have a suit laying around. Like, they don't have the military creating their suit for them. They don't have Tony Stark to create a suit for them anymore.
Nobody has Tony Stark to create a suit for them anymore.
I know, triggering. So I would think he would be a fun addition to S.H.I.E.L.D. Even if it's because he's hilarious. The actor playing him is so funny. He's got excellent timing. I think even if it was just for a few moments in movies, it would be fun to see him and just how much he's just a delight.
Yeah.
I adore him. So Luke Madison, for sure, of these characters.
Yeah, so
the two of them.
Yeah, so the actor is Griffin Matthews, who is also on The Flight Attendant, for those of you who watch that show. So who do you want to be canceled, that you don't want to ever see again, that you're just, I'm over?
Todd and Frogman can,
Todd and Eugene.
Canceled.
Yeah.
Let me reference a children's reboot of a show I loved.
Do it again.
Canceled.
All right, so let's get into the moving panels of this. And we're not going to talk a lot. We're more just going to talk about the show, talk about the finale, because I really think the finale just kind of really wrapped up everything.
Yeah.
And it wrapped it up in a way that it kind of explained what the show was.
Right.
The show, as we talked about in the last episode, the show really took its inspiration from John Byrne's sensational She-Hulk versus the savage She-Hulk, which was where it originally started. Because she was just like Hulk to begin with. Jennifer would get angry, and when she'd turn into the Hulk, she was a monster.
She was savage, classy, bougie, ratchet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you want to talk about we didn't get to talk about...
Yeah, we did. I got to talk about body, yada, 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 yada.
That's right. That was in the first 3 episodes. But then it all comes down to the final episode. So the final episode, we get this battle.
I would say the final episode and the last 5 to 10 minutes of the episode before.
Yeah, so we finally get this, like we talked about, where Todd injects himself. He turns into this Hulk character called Hulk King. Emil turns into Abomination. Hulk randomly shows back up. Bruce shows back up, and so it looks like, and Titania is there.
Yeah,
it looks like you're gonna have this big epic battle, and then, and then Jen just says, "No, wait, this is y'all really gonna end the show this way?"
Well, it kind of plays it as though like, whoa, this is too much, and then it plays it as though we, the viewer, have turned it off.
Well, and also the other point that she's trying to make is that the show's about She-Hulk, and you're making it look like She-Hulk needs all of this help,
right?
To fight off her bad guy. Now, I will say that what ends up happening is, again, straight out of the sensational She-Hulk comics, and Bethany and I had talked about this. There is an issue from 1992, She-Hulk number 37. In which she's up against a villain called the Living Eraser. He can literally just erase things out of existence.
Good.
And he ends up erasing everything. And
that makes for excellent comic book.
Well, you actually have like a couple of pages that are just pure white, nothing on them. Then all of a sudden, She-Hulk starts, talking to John Byrne. Well, we talked about this, how she would talk to him when she didn't agree with something or wanted something to go a certain way. And she's like, fans are not going to like this. And she rips through the page and she goes, you got to set everything back. You got to put everything back. This is stupid. This didn't work when it was done before in an alpha flight. She goes, you got to put everything back. And so John Burns puts everything back, and then She-Hulk and her guy friend just walk off. And that's the end of the story, end of the comic.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing here.
Right.
She gets so upset with the show that
she has to talk to Kevin.
Yeah, and so they make it look like you've exited out of the show, and they pop up the Disney Plus
like
screen.
Menu.
Yeah, and then you see her punch out the She-Hulk little thumbnail and climbs out of it, and she looks around and she looks for that what's the show called? Marvel
Avengers Assemble or
Denver,
something.
yeah, which is the behind the scenes, and she goes into that one, and she ends up at Marvel Studios, and she wants to talk to Kevin. And of course, we all know she's talking about Kevin Feige. I mean, I honestly was wondering, are they going to have a Kevin Feige cameo? Because we've never seen him in anything. But nope, turns out that Kevin Feige, or just Kevin, excuse me, Kevin is a robot. He's an artificial intelligence.
Which would explain a lot.
And she has to explain to him that what the fans really want out of her show and all. And so what were your thoughts on that kind of finale?
Okay.
Which they then went back to the show. So yeah.
Sort of. So I liked that idea because it was, I don't read the comics, but I did enjoy that they paid homage to the comic books, and that's how she really handled things in the comic books. I loved that. I thought it was hilarious that, she goes in, she has to sign the NDA, and then she still gets
and then they try to stop her. Yeah,
it's like, why did you make me sign the NDA? Everyone's got to sign the NDA.
Yeah.
And then, but she still gets to Kevin, and he's a robot, and the robot's wearing the hat. It's amazing, all of it. Mwah, chef's kiss. She goes through all of this stuff, and the way she explains it makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, yes, this is what I want to see. Let's do it. Let's go back. Let's do. The problem I had was not that. The problem I had was that when she went back, all of it was done.
Yeah. Yeah, but she was saying, like, the show didn't really need the big battle.
No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, like, I would have loved to have seen
some sort of
resolution. It felt a little lackluster to me.
Yeah, because she had actually been stripped of her powers.
Right.
Because they had put the inhibitor on her.
Which I would love to, once we're done discussing this, I would love to discuss that incident.
Okay. Yeah, and she's let go from her job.
Mm-hmm.
She has to move back home because she can't afford her apartment anymore. And again, she is trying to reach out to Bruce, so it kind of...
And he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and so that's when she goes to Emil's retreat. She goes there again, and that's when she finds out all the stuff about Ty, which was also confusing because it's like Emil was...
That was the thing, is I couldn't tell if Emil was a bad guy.
I don't think he was. I think he was...
Was he in... but that's where it became confusing, is I couldn't figure out, like...
Yeah.
So did Emil not know who it was he was hosting at his retreat? He doesn't do any kind of background check on people, even though he's clearly violating his parole. Like, he wouldn't make sure that they were cool.
Yeah, because even... Yeah, I don't know.
Like I said,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, it was...
I would have liked just like maybe 2 minutes of kind of the resolution of that moment. Of just, okay, actually show me. Okay, you've deleted all of this stuff. It's during the daytime. Emil gets, put back in jail or
Which
whatever.
He does. We do see that.
We see that, but like, I want to see where, her form of justice prevails. Not just like and here we are at the end. That happened. Y'all are just going to imagine that happening. And, okay, but I want to see it. Because this is a show, and you have to show it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, she talks to Kevin, which I did find it very cool. Kevin was actually, it stood for Knowledge Enhanced Visual Interconnectivity Nexus.
Which makes no sense.
And I would love to have been the writers that sat down in a room trying to come up with something to spell out Kevin.
I mean, all of that was gold. I really did enjoy that part. It just felt like once that part of it was resolved, we didn't get a resolution to the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Although I did love that Daredevil got to come back.
Oh yeah, no, Daredevil was great, and then him getting to wear
doing the walk of shame.
Well, yeah, that was
that was perfection.
Well, and see, here's the thing. So a lot of which we're about to really get into this. A lot of fans, bashed Daredevil being in this show because it was a complete departure of the gritty, dark, very adult Daredevil series from Netflix.
But this is a different, like, he's coming into a different series.
Well, and that's kind of my thought too. It's like, so no one can have a a lighter part of their life. No one can have these funny moments that have, like, if someone's dark and brooding, they're always dark and brooding. And yeah, I was fine. As I've talked about on this show before, I am a Daredevil fan. I love the Ben Affleck movie. Daredevil was the first comic I ever read. I am super excited about Daredevil Born Again coming, and Charlie Cox continuing to play the character.
And he's so good.
Oh yeah, he's a great Matt Murdock, great Daredevil. I love that he got the OG suit for this. He got to have that. Funny enough, Matt Murdock and Jennifer never actually crossed paths in the comics.
Well, that makes sense because she's supposed to be based in Los Angeles.
Not in the comic book. In the comic book, they're both New York lawyers, but yet they never cross paths.
I love that that's kind of how they brought him in.
Yes.
She's a lawyer. This is a lawyer show. So, of course, one of the most famous Marvel lawyers, is going to make an appearance. Yeah.
Yeah, and they give him, because it's kind of weird. I mean, he'd come all the way from New York to defend this fashion designer, and then you find out the fashion designer also made him a suit. So obviously, it makes sense.
I would like to just take a brief moment to talk about the the penultimate episode, the last few minutes, what sent Jennifer over the edge. And I think this is something that a lot of women have discussed and taken away. I feel like, and you can call me out on it if you disagree with me. I feel like Jennifer suffered so much in this show, like in her own world way.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously there are other characters that have gone through way worse things.
But again, for a personal,
because she lived a life. Bottom. She lived a life that was so relatable to real people. Like, she was a real person that just so happened to have superpowers, as opposed to these like super people who occasionally have relatable moments. And you finally feel like, oh, things are turning around for her. Even she says it, like, yeah, things are turning around. Now we're going to go to this conference, she said, or whatever.
Doesn't she even say isn't this the penultimate episode? Like, she says that, and it's like, so shouldn't there be some sort of twist or something that,
and as soon as she started talking about that, I'm like, oh gosh. Because we all know, like, something has happened.
Yeah, we know the guy's stolen all of her stuff, all of her phone.
I think the thing that really sent me over the edge with that whole scene was how violated she was in that moment. And so many women out there can relate to that level of violation, especially in this day and age of, we've got cameras in our pockets and we've got internet at our fingertips. Yeah. And it was a very tough thing to watch, but also a very relatable thing to watch. And it really played into this idea that women come up against this type of shaming, and it literally brought her world to a halt. Yeah. Like, she no longer had a job because of it. Granted, it was because of the way she reacted to it.
Which, again, is a very human moment.
Exactly.
Like, if she just happens to have superpowers.
Yes. Yeah. And I felt like it was a beautiful way they told that story. I hated how much she had to go through just to justify existing in this universe. I feel like not many of the superheroes or heroes in the Marvel universe have had to justify their existence as much as Jennifer has. It just, it sucked.
Yeah, but again, I think that was the overall, the overlying
the thesis
theme
of
the
show.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so let me ask you this.
Okay.
So even when all that was done, the whole conversation with Kevin and talking about the show and how it was all of that and didn't need all of the big villain fight and all, They then go back to her being at home, and they're having a nice little meal outside with the family. And then Hulk shows up.
With the son?
Yeah, with his son Scar from the comics. Although we're not going to get into that whole thing.
Because this is not his show.
Yeah, but so that's my question to you. Like, did you think it kind of undid a little bit of it?
I agree with that. Yeah, I didn't feel like it was necessary. I didn't need him to come back.
Well, it's setting up the next.
I get that, but
next
maybe
thing in the
like
Hulk storyline.
This show didn't do a lot of post-credit scenes. Make it a post-credit scene, but the fact that they put it in the actual
their post-credit scene was showing Wong getting Abomination out of jail again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna have that, like, make it a post-credit scene. Because it takes away from the fact that Jennifer fought so hard to establish herself as just She-Hulk.
Yeah.
Just Jennifer, attorney at law. And I will say...
Put the focus back on Hulk.
Yes. Yeah. It now, a lot of the things that people are talking about from that show aren't necessarily Jennifer. It's... Wait, Hulk has a son?
It's World War Hulk for comic book fans. Oh, they're going to do World War Hulk. And I mean, I'll even admit, part of me wonders, will Jennifer pop up in Daredevil Born Again?
I hope so.
Which then does Daredevil Born Again go back to that dark and gritty, and how does she exist?
I think they're going to have to balance that because the dark and gritty worked for Netflix, the Netflix series.
Oh, I don't see it going the same dark and gritty that it was on Netflix.
Right.
But even if they go back into that,
because it doesn't fit the whole. Yes, all the different Marvel movies are different and have different feelings, but none of them are that dark.
No, and then but the Netflix show were part of the MCU. They would talk about the stuff the Avengers were doing, but yeah, it's gonna be because even if you think of a show like Hawkeye, like if She-Hulk showed up in that, or
that would make more sense.
Captain America. And the Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for She-Hulk to show up in that, like, I'm interested to see how do they put She-Hulk into the other properties of the MCU.
I feel like they would have to, she wouldn't be able to break the fourth wall because it wouldn't be her story.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how they could justify it. And even if it was like, she popped up in a few things and didn't break the fourth wall, she was just Jennifer. And then hopefully she gets a season 2 of She-Hulk or whatever, where it is her story again. She can say, like, I'm sure you're wondering why I haven't talked to you guys in a while. Well, it's rude to talk during someone else's story. So shush, this is my story now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're getting into it.
Just a final thought for me. Okay. As far as She-Hulk is concerned, because this is my episode, Laramy, calm down. Anyways, so one of the things I really liked about this show was she did establish herself as an individual. So many times, it kind of has like that Pac-Man effect, where it's the same story, it's just a girl. This was not the same story as the Hulk.
No.
This was...
Which I think they established very quickly.
And I love that.
And that was established in the first episode.
Because I will say, like, I was not interested in the show at all. Because I figured it was going to be the Hulk, but with a girl. It was going to be like Pac-Man, but with a bow. So it's Miss Pac-Man. See, girls will like it now.
Yeah. And
I did. It was very relatable. It had something that all people could be drawn to. Many people have felt vulnerable. Many people have felt exposed. Many people have felt like they have had to fight to be seen as just themselves. Mm-hmm. And she displayed that very openly and in a very vulnerable way.
Yeah.
And I liked that the most about this show.
Are you talking about how she's just like the Miss Pac-Man? Mm-hmm. That's really kind of how she was created. So, the Incredible Hulk television show was a huge hit. Then you had a show like The Bionic Man that then spun off The Bionic Woman.
Right, where it was just the same thing, but we can market it to girls now.
Yeah, so there was apparently talk of introducing a female Hulk on the television show. And Stan Lee got wind of this and said, okay, we've got to go ahead and own this property. So they just created She-Hulk.
And it's the exact same stories, same
started off pretty much, started off roughly the same.
But she has to wear a shirt when she morphs.
Yeah.
Or people get mad.
So yeah, she really was just, and again, the name, She-Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a bad name.
It is.
It has become,
I like that she owned it. Like, she was able to address the fact that this is not a good name, but this is the name I have.
But yeah, She-Hulk is a bad name. But I mean, so's He-Man, when you really think about it. All right, so you kind of were getting into this anyway, but let's get into Bag It, Stack It, or Trade It for, let's just say, the whole season 1. So you've kind of already shared your thoughts, but anything else you want to say? And is it going to be Bag It, Stack It, or Trade It?
So, like I said, I enjoyed it. I feel like it is a property that I will return to again. I'd like to see how it grows. With that being said, I am going to bag it. And that's mainly just because she is one of the very few Marvel characters, although I will say they're getting better at becoming more relatable. They're real people with real human stakes. Like, it's not like Iron Man where if he doesn't do X, Y, or Z, he will blow up a building, or I'm never going to relate to that kind of stakes. But I can relate to, if I don't get a job, I will lose my home. Mm-hmm. If I don't,
or the loss of a loved one, like Wanda has to go through, and or even America Chavez and Doctor Strange, where
it's becoming that oh, I understand the pain they're going through. And
Peter Parker in No Way Home.
Oh. Yeah. Although, granted, probably can't say never, but probably will never experience something where the Grand High Wizard will turn all the world into forgetting about me.
Yeah, but still that feeling of
I've lost everyone I love.
Yeah. You're alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great way of telling, like, these big stories in small ways. And so that is the reason I want to bag it. It's a story that is relatable to a lot of people, specifically women, because of the different challenges she has to face, the fact that she has to justify herself not only as a human being, as a superhero, as a woman, as a lawyer, everything. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Bag it. I'm gonna bag it.
Yeah, I'm gonna bag it too. And we've talked about all the things. Bethany's said all this stuff, and we've talked about it. I want to talk to the comic book fans out there that bash this show.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Jessica Gao, who was behind this show, wrote a lot of it. Yeah, there was a team of writers, but she was the main force behind it. She took these completely bottom of the barrel characters, the Wrecking Crew, Frogman, all the D-list villains we talked about, and as we've said, she made them interesting.
Right.
She made them fun. We even if we hated the character, we still had a connection to that character. Mm-hmm. We didn't just go, what was that? Like, why was that on? They were there for a purpose.
Right.
And she took these characters that would be absolutely useless, and she gave them a purpose on this show. James Gunn did the same thing with Guardians of the Galaxy. Right. Not only is that a team in the comics that most people were not familiar with until the movie, but it's made up of a bunch of characters that weren't doing great on their own, so they get together. And then he even pulled random people from that universe. I mean, he did Taserface in one of them. And then he did the same thing with the Suicide Squad. He takes these random DC villains. I mean, Peacemaker's not even on anyone's radar before the Suicide Squad and John Cena. But when James Gunn does that, he gets praised.
Of course he does.
He gets said that he's a genius for what he is able to do. And yet here's Jessica Gal doing roughly the same thing, and she's getting scrutiny over it.
What's the difference between the two of those people there?
Oh, I know. So yeah, you've got a man who's using campy comic characters, and he's a genius. And then a woman does the exact same thing, and she's mocked and ridiculed and said that she's destroying the comic characters, and it's just not true. Like, she did not destroy any character.
No.
You know, like I mentioned earlier about with Daredevil, you know, some people thought she ruined the Charlie Cox Daredevil character. I think she gave another level to the Charlie Cox Daredevil character.
I will say I did not watch The Defenders on Netflix, but he still had the same type vibe. Like, he wasn't bubbly and silly. Like, he made jokes, but they were still like gruff Batman joke type things. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so
But again, like I said, I think
it
gave another level to the character.
Exactly.
Which is what she did with all of these characters.
Right.
You know, she gave depth, she gave humanity, she gave personality, she gave humor, she gave interest to these characters that otherwise would be forgotten characters on the pages of Marvel Comics.
Right.
And she should be celebrated for that, because she has expanded the Marvel Universe so much from this show. And I am very interested to see where all of it goes. You know, whether the She-Hulk series gets a season, or, as we talked about, will Jennifer show up in other properties, and how will this move forward? I'm very interested. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do with a movie or television show.
Is make you want more.
Yeah, make you want more. And that's what I want after seeing this show. I want more. So kudos to Jessica Gal. And if I'm pronouncing her last name, I apologize. It was a great show, and I think the Marvel shows just about get better with each one. You know, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but I do think they're learning from doing series, and they're building the Marvel universe. I mean, you're talking Phase 4 has just ended with Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and you've had just as many movies as you have series in this phase. And so the series are just as important.
I agree. And I feel like, you know, we've discussed this pretty much anytime you and I discuss any sort of property. We talk about the effect it has on our children. This was a show, and we mentioned it in the first one, that our daughter loved. She gets to see a strong woman be extremely vulnerable.
Both figuratively and literally.
Exactly. Yeah. And she gets to watch her overcome hardship and learn that, you know, she gets to learn about a lot of things, about how some of the best things about society, but also some of the worst things about society, but how that's not the only things that are out there, and just because it exists doesn't mean that's, you know, the end of the world, that you can overcome that. She gets to see these characters. She gets to experience things that you experienced as a child with, you know, comic books and the cartoons that you watched on television. She gets to experience that at a heightened level.
Yeah.
I mean, what you watched was basically stuff to sell you toys.
I don't know, Batman the Animated Series.
I'm not saying so much that, but I'm saying, like...
No, I know what you're saying.
He-Man.
Yeah. He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats. Those things. Yeah.
But those were things that you look back on fondly, and you want to revisit those things, and you enjoyed them. Our kid gets to look back on things like She-Hulk and Miss Marvel, and I think that's pretty awesome. Because, I mean, there's some depth there that she's not going to get now. But then maybe 10 years from now, she might, you know, if it all still exists, if we're all still here, got dark a little bit. You know, she can look back and say, like, oh, wow. And, you know, I enjoy that aspect of these shows, too, is we get to share them with our kid. And they're things that I'm proud to share with our kid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good show. I don't know why so many people were hating on it. But hey, that's just always, you never are going to make everybody happy.
Yeah, but the
So,
people who are unhappy about this property are very loud.
all right. Well, thank you, Bethany, for joining me, and happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Rate and review the show on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. Tell your friends about the show and all that. And I guess this is your show, so you should end it.
For Moving Panels, I'm Bethany Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-host to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.